In the misty halls of Ashwood Manor, a priceless emerald brooch vanishes from a locked safe, threatening to unravel a family's darkest secrets. Hercule Poirot, with his razor-sharp mind, steps into a web of greed, betrayal, and a hidden legacy. Tied to a cursed heirloom, as debts mount, alibis crumble, and a solicitor's scheme comes to light, Poirot uncovers a truth that could shatter the Hargrove dynasty. Will he restore the brooch and its secrets before scandal consumes them all? The little grey cells are at work. Join the mystery. Chapter 1. The Summons to Ashwood Manor. Late autumn mist clung to the windows of the train as it chugged through the somber English countryside. Its rhythmic clatter a counterpoint to Hercule Poirot's precise thoughts. He sat erect, his gloved hands folded over the silver head of his cane, his sharp green eyes fixed on some invisible point beyond the carriage. His meticulously groomed mustache twitched slightly as he adjusted his pristine Homburg hat. Beside him, Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the epitome of English geniality, leafed through a newspaper. Though his attention wandered to the rolling hills outside, dappled with the fading gold of October. "Poirot, old chap," Hastings ventured, folding the paper with a rustle. "This summons of yours rather mysterious, don't you think?" Mrs. Hargrove's letter was dashed vague. He patted his pocket, where the missive in question rested, its urgent tone still fresh in his mind. Poirot's lips curved into a faint, enigmatic smile. "Vague, mon ami. Nan, it is precise in its desperation. A woman such as Mrs. Lavinia Hargrove does not write to Hercule Poirot for trivialities. The emerald brooch, she speaks of it, is not merely a jewel, but a key to some deeper secret. Mark my words, Hastings, we are summoned to unravel more than a theft." The letter, penned in a trembling hand on cream stationery embossed with the Hargrove crest, had arrived at Poirot's London flat 2 days prior. Its contents were brief but compelling. The disappearance of a priceless emerald brooch, an heirloom of the Hargrove family, from a locked safe in Ashwood Manor. "Only your genius can save us from disgrace," Mrs. Hargrove had written, her words laced with a fear that piqued Poirot's curiosity. He had accepted the case at once, his little grey cells already stirring with anticipation. As the train slowed, the grey silhouette of Ashwood Manor emerged through the fog, its Gothic spires looming like silent sentinels. The carriage that met them at the station was driven by a taciturn coachman, his face half hidden by a scarf against the chill. The journey to the manor was silent, save for the creak of wheels and the distant caw of rooks. Hastings shivered, pulling his coat tighter, while Poirot, unperturbed, observed the landscape with the intensity of a hawk. At the manor's imposing oak doors, they were greeted by Mr. Finch, the butler, a tall man with a face carved from granite, his dark eyes flickering with something akin to unease. His bow was stiff, his voice clipped as he announced, "Mrs. Hargrove awaits you in the parlor, gentlemen." He led them through a labyrinth of corridors, their footsteps echoing on polished floors adorned with ancestral portraits. The air was heavy with the scent of old wood and wax, and Hastings noted the faint dust on the chandeliers, a sign of a household stretched thin. In the parlor, Mrs. Lavinia Hargrove rose to greet them, her delicate frame swathed in black silk, a mourning gown that spoke of losses older than the theft. Her silver hair was pinned elegantly, but her pale blue eyes betrayed a restlessness that no amount of composure could mask. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice low and tremulous, "I am eternally grateful you have come. The brooch, it is not merely its value, though that is considerable. It is the heart of our family, a relic passed down for generations. It vanished from my safe 2 nights ago, and I fear scandal will follow." Poirot inclined his head, his gaze never leaving her face. "Madame, rest assured, Hercule Poirot does not fail in matters of such delicacy. Pray, tell me all you know of this theft." Mrs. Hargrove sank into a velvet chair, her hands twisting a lace handkerchief. "The brooch was kept in a safe in my study, locked always. I checked it myself at dusk 2 evenings ago, and by morning it was gone. The safe was undisturbed, the lock unforced. Only I and my stepson, Colonel Marcus, possess keys, and both are secure. I cannot fathom how it was taken." Hastings, leaning forward, interjected, "Could it have been an outsider, Mrs. Hargrove? A burglar, perhaps?" She shook her head, her lips tightening. "Impossible. The manor is locked at night, and the dogs would have raised an alarm. Oh, it must be someone within these walls." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "And yet, I trust my household, or I did." Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest. "And the brooch, Madame, what is its history? You speak of it as more than a jewel." Mrs. Hargrove hesitated, her gaze darting to the fire crackling in the hearth. "It is said to carry a curse," she said at last. "An ancestor, Lady Beatrice Hargrove, wore it when she met her end under mysterious circumstances. Some say it brings misfortune. I never believed such tales, but now—" She trailed off, her fingers tightening on the handkerchief. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing every word, every gesture. "We shall dine with your family tonight. I wish to observe them. The truth, madame, hides in the smallest details." As Finch led them to their rooms, Poirot paused by a portrait of a stern-faced woman, her neck adorned with a glittering emerald brooch. "Lady Beatrice, I presume," he murmured. Finch nodded curtly, his discomfort palpable. Hastings, trailing behind, whispered, "Queer business, Poirot. This place feels like it's holding its breath." Poirot's smile was cryptic. "Indeed, mon ami, and Hercule Poirot shall make it exhale the truth." Chapter 2. The Hargrove household. The dining room of Ashwood Manor gleamed under the soft glow of a crystal chandelier, its light casting delicate prisms across the polished mahogany table. The air was thick with the aroma of roasted pheasant and claret, yet an undercurrent of unease rippled through the room, as tangible as the mist that clung to the manor's ancient stones. Hercule Poirot, seated at the right hand of Mrs. Lavinia Hargrove, observed the assembled company with the precision of a watchmaker, his sharp green eyes noting every glance, every gesture, every pause that betrayed more than words could conceal. Captain Hastings, opposite him, fidgeted with his napkin, his genial demeanor tempered by the palpable tension in the room. Mrs. Hargrove, at the head of the table, presided with a brittle grace, her silver hair catching the candlelight as she signaled the butler, Mr. Finch, to serve the first course. Her black silk gown rustled faintly as she turned to Poirot, her voice low but steady. "Monsieur Poirot, allow me to introduce my family and guests. I trust you will find them cooperative." Her eyes flickered with a mix of hope and apprehension, as if she feared what his scrutiny might uncover. To her left sat Colonel Marcus Hargrove, Her stepson, a man of perhaps 40, whose broad shoulders and military bearing suggested a life of command, though his florid complexion and restless fingers hinted at less disciplined habits. His dark eyes, set deep beneath a heavy brow, darted toward Poirot with a mixture of curiosity and defiance. "Heard of you, Poirot," he said, his voice gruff as he sliced into his pheasant. "Hope you're as clever as they say. This brooch business is a damned nuisance, but I reckon it's some servant's sticky fingers." He shot a glance at Finch, who stood impassive by the sideboard, pouring wine with mechanical precision. Beside Marcus sat Miss Sylvia Trent, his fiancée, a striking woman in her late 20s with auburn hair swept into an elegant chignon. Her emerald green dress, daringly modern, clung to her slender frame, and her eyes, a vivid hazel, sparkled with a wit that seemed to dance on the edge of mischief. She leaned forward, her voice light but pointed. "Oh, Marcus, don't be so quick to blame the staff. The brooch is cursed, you know. My grandmother used to tell tales of Lady Beatrice Hargrove. She wore it when she met her tragic end. Perhaps it simply vanished into the ether." Her lips curved into a half-smile, but Poirot noted the way her fingers tightened around her wineglass. Betraying attention her jest sought to mask. Across from Sylvia sat Miss Edith Crane, Mrs. Hargrove's niece, a pale young woman of 20, whose plain grey dress and tightly pinned hair gave her the air of a governess rather than a family member. Her spectacles glinted as she kept her gaze fixed on her plate, her fork moving with meticulous care. When Sylvia mentioned the curse, Edith's hand trembled, and a faint flush crept up her neck. "Superstitions are nonsense," she murmured, almost to herself, her voice barely audible over the clink of silverware. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Her reticence was as telling as Sylvia's bravado. At the far end of the table sat Mr. Leonard Price, the family solicitor, a portly man in his 50s with a florid face and a too-wide smile. His pinstriped suit strained slightly at the seams, and his jovial manner seemed calculated to diffuse the room's tension. Now, let's not get carried away with ghost stories," he said, chuckling as he raised his glass. "The brooch is valuable, yes, but it's a matter for logic, not curses. Monsieur Poirot, I'm sure you'll have this sorted in no time." His eyes met Poirot's, holding them a fraction too long, as if gauging the detective's perception. The staff, though not seated, were ever present in Poirot's observations. Finch, the butler, moved with the silent efficiency of a shadow. His face an unreadable mask, save for the occasional tightening of his jaw. Rose, the maid, a slight girl with mousy hair and darting eyes, served the soup with a clumsiness that suggested nerves rather than incompetence. She flinched when Marcus's voice boomed, and Poirot noted her quick glance toward the door, as if longing to escape. Beyond the dining room, he knew of Mr. Dobbs, the gardener, a surly figure glimpsed earlier through a window, his weathered face etched with a scowl as he pruned the rosebeds. As the meal progressed, conversation turned to the brooch's disappearance, each voice revealing more than its speaker intended. Marcus, downing his wine with a grimace, dismissed the theft as a trifling matter blown out of proportion. "Mother, you fuss too much," he said, addressing Mrs. Hargrove with a familiarity that bordered on disrespect. "It'll turn up, or we'll claim the insurance. No need for all this drama." His tone was cavalier, but Poirot caught the flicker of unease in his eyes, as if he feared the insurance might not cover his own troubles. Mrs. Hargrove's lips tightened. "Marcus, it is not merely the cost. The brooch is a symbol of our family's honor. Its loss is unthinkable." Her voice wavered, and she looked to Poirot, her eyes pleading for reassurance. Sylvia, twirling a lock of hair, interjected with a theatrical sigh. "Perhaps it's Lady Beatrice's ghost, come to reclaim her treasure. I painted her portrait once, you know, from the old miniature in the library. Such a tragic figure betrayed by love, they say, and dead by her own hand. Or was it murder?" Her eyes sparkled with mischief. But Poirot noted Edith's sharp intake of breath at the word murder, her fork clattering against her plate. "Really, Sylvia," Edith said, her voice sharper now, "such tales are unbecoming. The brooch was stolen, not spirited away. We should focus on facts." Her words were firm, but her hands shook as she adjusted her spectacles. And Poirot wondered what facts she feared to face. Price, ever the peacemaker, raised his hands. "Let's not quarrel, my dears. Monsieur Poirot, perhaps you have questions. We're all eager to assist." His smile was too broad, his tone too eager, and Poirot's mustache twitched as he filed away the solicitor's eagerness for later scrutiny. "Mercy, Monsieur Price," Poirot said, his voice smooth as velvet. "I have, as you say, questions. But for now, I observe. The truth, it reveals itself in the smallest details, the glance, the gesture, the word unspoken." He leaned back, his fingers steepled, and let his gaze sweep the table, noting how each person reacted to his words. Marcus scowled, Sylvia arched an eyebrow, Edith blushed, and Price's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Mrs. Hargrove clutched her napkin, her eyes fixed on Poirot with a desperate hope. The meal continued, but the conversation grew stilted, each attempt at lightness overshadowed by the weight of the missing brooch. Marcus spoke of estate matters, hinting at financial strains that made Hastings raise an eyebrow. "Rough year for the tenants," Marcus muttered, "but we'll manage." Sylvia countered with a tale of her latest painting exhibition in London, her voice bright but her eyes darting to Marcus, as if gauging his mood. Edith remained silent, her thoughts seemingly elsewhere, while Price filled the gaps with anecdotes about local gentry, each story less convincing than the last. Poirot, ever attentive, noted the dynamics at play. Marcus's brusqueness suggested a man accustomed to control, yet his flushed cheeks hinted at pressures beyond his command. Sylvia's charm was a carefully crafted shield, her flirtatious glances masking a deeper calculation. Edith's reserve was not mere shyness but a wall, perhaps hiding knowledge she dared not share. Price's joviality was a performance, his laughter too loud, his eyes too watchful, and the staff inch's silent efficiency, Rose's nervous fumbles, Dobbs's absence each added a thread to the tapestry. Poirot was beginning to weave as dessert was served a delicate lemon syllabub. Poirot steered the conversation to the night of the theft. "Madame Hargrove," he said, his tone gentle but probing, "you saw the brooch at dusk, and by morning it was gone. Tell me, who was in the manor that evening?" Mrs. Hargrove hesitated, her fingers tracing the edge of her glass. "Of us were here Marcus, Sylvia, Edith, Mr. Price, who dined with us, and the staff, of course. I retired early, as is my custom, and locked the study myself. The safe was secure, I swear it. Marcus snorted. And no one could have got in without a key, unless they're a blasted ghost. I was in the billiard room with Price till midnight, wasn't I? He looked to the solicitor for confirmation, and Price nodded vigorously, though Poirot noted the slight delay in his response. I was in my studio, sketching, Sylvia offered unprompted. The moonlight was divine, and I couldn't resist. Alone, I'm afraid no one to vouch for me. Her smile was playful, but her eyes flicked to Marcus, as if seeking his approval. Edith, pushing a spoonful of syllabub aside, spoke softly. I was reading in my room, I heard nothing unusual. Her voice was steady, but her fingers twisted a napkin into knots, and Poirot's gaze lingered on her. And the staff? Poirot asked, turning to Finch, who stood by the door, his hands clasped behind his back. All accounted for, sir, Finch said, his voice flat. Rose was in the kitchen, preparing the evening trays. Dobbs was in his quarters by the stables, as far as I know. I patrolled the house before locking up at 10. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing each alibi, each inflection. Most interesting, he said, his tone betraying nothing. The brooch, it seems, has vanished into thin air, yet the air in this house is heavy with secrets. I shall find them. Mise Amos, for Hercule Poirot sees what others do not. The room fell silent, the clink of cutlery stilled. Mrs. Hargrove's eyes shone with gratitude, Marcus's with irritation, Sylvia's with amusement, Edith's with fear, and Price's with a wariness he could not quite conceal. Finch, impassive, retreated to the sideboard. But Poirot caught the butler's hands trembling as he poured more wine as the meal concluded. Mrs. Hargrove invited Poirot and Hastings to join her in the drawing-room for coffee, but Poirot demurred, citing a need to reflect. The little grey cells, madame, they require solitude to work their magic, he said, his smile disarming yet resolute. She nodded, her face a mask of hope and dread. In the corridor, Hastings whispered, "Good Lord Poirot, what a crew! Marcus is a bully, Sylvia's a flirt, Edith's hiding something, and Pricewell, he's too cheerful by half. And that butler, Finch, gives me the creeps. What do you make of it?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "I make nothing yet, mon ami, but I observe much. The Hargrove household is a stage, and each player has a role. The brooch is the star, but the plotted is far from clear. We must watch, listen, and wait for the curtain to rise on the truth." As they ascended the grand staircase to their rooms, Poirot paused by a stained-glass window depicting a knight and a lady. The lady's throat adorned with a green gem that mirrored the missing brooch. "A clue, perhaps," he murmured, "or a warning." Hastings shivered, but Poirot's smile was serene, his mind already spinning the threads of suspicion into a pattern only he could see. Chapter 3. The locked safe. The morning mist had barely lifted from the grounds of Ashwood Manor when Hercule Poirot, clad in a meticulously tailored overcoat, made his way to the study where the emerald brooch had vanished. The room, situated at the end of a dimly lit corridor, exuded an air of faded grandeur. Its walls were lined with leather-bound volumes, their spines cracked with age, and a heavy velvet curtain framed a tall window overlooking the frost-kissed gardens. Captain Hastings trailed behind, his breath visible in the chilly air, his notebook clutched like a talisman against the manor's oppressive silence. Poirot paused at the threshold, his sharp eyes sweeping the room with the precision of a surveyor. "Here, mon ami, is the stage of our little drama," he said, his voice low but resonant, "the locked safe, the missing brooch-cest unmistar, that demands order and method." He gestured toward the safe, a formidable iron box embedded in the wall beside a mahogany desk, its surface gleaming dully in the morning light. The safe was a relic of Victorian craftsmanship, its edges adorned with faint engravings of ivy leaves. Poirot knelt before it, his gloved fingers tracing the lock's contours. "No scratches, no signs of force," he murmured, producing a small magnifying glass from his pocket. He examined the keyhole with the intensity of a jeweler inspecting a flawless gem curio. "The lock is pristine, yet the brooch is gone. This is not the work of a common thief, Hastings." Hastings, peering over Poirot's shoulder, frowned. "Couldn't someone have picked the lock? I've read about such things, clever chaps with tools and all that." His tone was hopeful, but Poirot's shake of the head was definitive. "Nan, mon ami. A picked lock leaves traces microscopic, perhaps, but traces nonetheless. Here, there are none. The safe was opened with a key, or—" He paused, his mustache twitching as a thought crystallized. "Or by some other means we have yet to discover." Mrs. Hargrove, summoned to the study, stood by the desk, her hands clasped tightly. Her black silk dress seemed to absorb the light, and her pale eyes followed Poirot's movements with a mixture of awe and anxiety. "I locked the safe myself at dusk, Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady but strained. "I always do. The brooch was there, nestled in its velvet case. I saw it with my own eyes. And the key?" Madame Poirot asked, rising to his full, if modest height. "Where is it kept?" She gestured to a delicate silver chain around her neck, from which hung a small key. "Always with me, even at night. Marcus has the only other key, and he assures me it never leaves his possession." Poirot nodded, his gaze lingering on the key. "And no one else has access?" "No one at all." Mrs. Hargrove shook her head. "The Staffinch, Rose, Dobbs, they have no reason to enter the study. The room is locked when not in use, and I hold the only key to the door as well." Hastings, scribbling in his notebook, looked up. "What about windows? Could someone have climbed in?" Poirot crossed to the window, pushing aside the heavy curtain. The latch was secure, the glass unmarred. "No signs of entry here," he said, tapping the frame. "The window is too high for a ladder without leaving marks on the sill or the ground below. I shall inspect the gardens later, but I suspect they will tell the same story." He returned to the safe, his fingers brushing the cold iron. Madame described the brooch, s'il vous plaît, every detail. Mrs. Hargrove's eyes softened, as if recalling a cherished memory. "It is a star-shaped piece, set with a large emerald at its center, surrounded by smaller diamonds. The gold setting is intricate, engraved with a pattern of roses. It was made for Lady Beatrice Hargrove, my husband's grattant, in 1820. She wore it at her betrothal ball. Before her tragedy, her voice faltered, and she looked away, toward a portrait above the fireplace, a stern woman with dark hair, her throat adorned with the very brooch in question. Poirot followed her gaze, his mind cataloging the connection. This Lady Beatrice, she is central to the curse. Tell me more of this tale. Mrs. Hargrove hesitated, her fingers tightening on her chain. It is an old story, perhaps mere gossip. Beatrice was betrothed to a lord, but she fell in love with another, a poet, they say. When her lover died under mysterious circumstances, she was found dead soon after, the brooch pinned to her gown. Some say she took her own life, others whisper of foul play. The brooch has been locked away ever since, until I inherited it. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And you believe this curse, madame? She shook her head, but her expression was uncertain. I am a practical woman, Monsieur Poirot, but it's lost now. It feels like an omen. Hastings, reiver pragmatic, Escola Superior de Tecnologia e Gestão de Oliveira do Hospital, cleared his throat. Sounds like a lot of rot to me. Probably some clever thief with a knack for locks. What about the staff, Poirot? That maid, Rose, looked nervous as a cat last night. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. The staff, yes. We shall speak with them. He turned to Mrs. Hargrove, summoned the butler, Finch, and the maid, Rose. I wish to question them here, where the crime occurred. Finch appeared first, his tall frame rigid, his face a mask of deference. You wished to see me, sir? He asked, his voice as smooth as polished stone but with a faint edge of wariness. Oui, Monsieur Finch, Poirot said, pacing slowly before the safe. You are the butler, the guardian of this household's order. Tell me, where were you the night the brooch vanished? Finch's eyes flickered, but his posture remained impeccable. I was in the servants' hall until 9, sir, overseeing the evening duties. Then I made my rounds, locking the doors and windows, as is my custom. By 10, I was in my quarters. And you heard nothing, saw nothing unusual. Nothing, sir. The house was quiet. Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. And the study, you have no access to the safe or its key. Finch's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. No, sir. Only Mrs. Hargrove and Colonel Marcus have keys. I have no business in this room unless summoned. Poirot nodded, dismissing him with a wave. Mercy, Finch. You may go for now. Rose entered next, her small frame trembling as she stood before the safe. Her mousy hair was tucked beneath a cap, and her hands twisted in her apron. Please, sir, I don't know anything, she said before Poirot could speak. Her voice high with panic. Calm, mademoiselle, Poirot said gently, his tone soothing yet probing. You were in the kitchen that night. Did you see anyone near the study, perhaps someone who should not have been there? Rose's eyes darted to the door, as if expecting an interruption. No, sir, I was washing dishes till late. Mr. Finch sent me to bed after 10. I didn't come this way at all. Poirot leaned closer, his voice soft but insistent. And Colonel Marcus, you seem uneasy when he is mentioned. Why is this? Rose flushed, her hands twisting harder. He's a hard man, sir. Shouts sometimes, when he's in his cups. But I don't know nothing about the brooch, I swear. Poirot studied her, noting the sweat beading on her forehead despite the room's chill. Very well, Rose. You may return to your duties. As she scurried out, Hastings whispered, She's hiding something, Poirot. Did you see how she jumped at Marcus's name? Oui, mon ami, Poirot replied, his eyes still on the safe. but hiding what? Fear, perhaps, or knowledge. We must tread carefully. He circled the room once more, pausing by the desk. Blotter, a pen, a stack of letters, nothing out of place, yet something nagged at him. He lifted the blotter, revealing a faint indentation, as if a heavy object had rested there briefly. Interesting, he murmured, running his finger along the mark. Something was here, and then removed. A tool, perhaps, or something else entirely. Hastings frowned. A tool. You think someone tampered with the safe after all? Poirot's smile was cryptic. Not tampered, Hastings. Outwitted. The safe is a puzzle, and the thief is clever. But Hercule Poirot is cleverer still. He turned to Mrs. Hargrove, who had watched the interrogations in silence. Madame, I must ask one more thing. This brooch, has anyone shown unusual interest in it recently? A visitor, perhaps? Her brow furrowed. There was Mr. Vaughan, the jeweler, who came to appraise it last week. He was thorough, but I thought nothing of it. Marcus arranged his visit, said it was for insurance purposes. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Vaughan, this is most illuminating. We shall visit him, Hastings, in the village. But first, I must see the gardens. The exterior may tell us what the interior conceals. As they left the study, Poirot paused by the portrait of Lady Beatrice, her painted eyes seeming to follow him. You guard your secrets well, he murmured, as if addressing her. But no secret escapes Hercule Poirot. Hastings, trailing behind, shook his head. This place gives me the shivers, Poirot. Curses, locked safes, nervous maidsets, like something out of a novel. Poirot chuckled softly. A novel, perhaps, but one written by human hands, and I, Hercule Poirot, shall read between its lines. Chapter 4. Whispers of Greed. The late morning sun struggled through the heavy clouds, casting a pallid light over Ashwood Manor's sprawling gardens as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings stepped onto the gravel path. The air was crisp, scented, with damp earth and the faint tang of decaying leaves, and the distant caw of a rook punctuated the silence. Poirot, immaculate in his overcoat, leaned lightly on his cane, his eyes scanning the manicured hedges and rose beds with the intensity of a general surveying a battlefield. Hastings, bundled against the chill, clutched his notebook, his breath forming fleeting clouds as he glanced warily at the Manor's looming facade. Poirot, I don't see what the gardens have to do with a locked safe, Hastings said, his tone betraying a touch of impatience. Surely the thief didn't climb a rosebush to get in. Poirot's mustache twitched with a faint smile. Patience, mon ami. The truth is like a garden, it hides in the shadows of the ordinary. We seek not only clues but motives, and motives bloom where secrets are sown. He gestured toward the lawn, where Mr. Dobbs, the gardener, was raking leaves with a sullen air. Let us begin with him. His absence last night was conspicuous. They approached Dobbs, a wiry man in his 50s, with a face weathered like old leather, his eyes narrowed beneath a battered cap. He paused his raking, leaning on the handle as Poirot greeted him with a courteous nod. Monsieur Dobbs, a moment of your time. You are the keeper of these fine grounds. Tell me, where were you 2 nights ago, when the brooch vanished? Dobbs' scowl deepened, his knuckles whitening on the rake. In me quarters by the stables, sir, same as always. Don't know nothin' about no brooch." His voice was gruff, his dialect thick with the local burr, but Poirot caught the fleeting glance toward the manor, as if measuring the distance to safety. "You saw no one near the study window?" Poirot pressed, his tone gentle but insistent. "No stranger lurking in the shadows?" Dobbs shook his head, his eyes fixed on the ground. "Saw a man once, few days back, skulkin' near the gate. Didn't get a good look. Could have been anyone." He resumed raking with unnecessary vigor, leaves scattering like his thoughts. Poirot's gaze lingered on the gardener, noting the tension in his shoulders. "Mercy, Monsieur Dobbs. We shall speak again." As they walked away, he murmured to Hastings, "He knows more than he says, but fear or loyalty binds his tongue. We must find what loosens it." They circled the manor, Poirot's keen eyes inspecting the ground beneath the study window. The earth was undisturbed, no ladder marks or footprints marring the frost-dusted grass. "As I suspected," he said, tapping his cane. "No entry from without. The thief was already within." Back inside, the manor's somber halls felt colder, the weight of suspicion settling like dust. Poirot requested tea in the drawing-room, where Mrs. Hargrove joined them, her frail hands clutching a shawl. The room was a study in contrasts, opulent with its gilded mirrors and silk upholstery, yet heavy with an air of secrets long buried. As Rose, the maid, served the tea with trembling hands, Poirot turned to Mrs. Hargrove. "Madame, you mentioned the brooch's insurance. Tell me, who arranged this policy?" Her brow furrowed, her fingers tightening on her shawl. "Mr. Price, our solicitor, handled it last year. He said it was prudent, given the brooch's value." Marcus agreed, though he grumbled about the cost. Her voice held a trace of unease, as if the memory stirred doubts. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing the detail. And this jeweler, Monsieur Van, what was his manner when he appraised the brooch? He was meticulous, Mrs. Hargrove said, hesitating. He spent nearly an hour examining it, asking about its history. I thought him overly curious, but Marcus insisted he was reputable. Hastings, sipping his tea, interjected, "Sounds like this Vaughan might be worth a closer look, Poirot." "A jeweler with sticky fingers, perhaps." "Perhaps," Poirot said, his tone non-committal. "But the little grey cells suggest a deeper game. We must visit this Vaughan, but first, let us explore the household's currents." The opportunity came that afternoon, when Sylvia Trent invited Poirot and Hastings to view her studio, a converted conservatory at the manor's west end. The room was a riot of color, canvases strewn with vibrant landscapes and brooding portraits, the air thick with the scent of turpentine. Sylvia, in a paint-splattered smock, gestured to a half-finished portrait of Lady Beatrice, her painted eyes gleaming with the emerald brooch. "I've been obsessed with her story," Sylvia admitted, her hazel eyes bright with enthusiasm. "The curse, the tragedy, it's all so deliciously gothic." Poirot studied the painting, noting the brooch's intricate details. "You have captured it well, mademoiselle. Tell me, did you discuss this portrait with Monsieur Vaughan?" Sylvia's smile faltered, her brush pausing mid-stroke. "He saw it, yes. Asked a lot of questions about the brooch, its weight, its setting. I thought he was just being thorough." Her tone was light, but her eyes flicked to the door, as if expecting an interruption. Poirot's gaze was piercing. "And Colonel Marcus, He shares your fascination with the brooch. She laughed, a brittle sound. Marcus. He cares more about his horses than family heirlooms. He only perked up when Vaughn mentioned its market value. Said something about easing the estate's burdens. Typical Marcus. Her words were casual, but Poirot caught the edge of resentment, as if Marcus's priorities rankled her. As they left the studio, Hastings whispered, "She's a cool one, Poirot, but that bit about Marcus and the estate sounds like money troubles to me." "Oui, mon ami," Poirot replied, his eyes narrowing. "Money is a powerful motive, but not the only one. We must look beyond the surface." That evening, Poirot sought out Edith Crane, finding her in the library, poring over a volume of local history. The room was dim, lit only by a single lamp, and Edith's spectacles glinted as she looked up, startled. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, closing the book with a snap. "I didn't hear you come in." "Pardon, mademoiselle," Poirot said, his tone soothing. "I wished to speak of the brooch. You seem troubled by its history. Why is this?" Edith's hands tightened on the book, her knuckles white. "It's nothing, really. Just old stories. Lady Beatrice's death was a scandal, and the brooch, it's tied to that shame. I don't like to dwell on it." Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. Poirot leaned closer, his voice soft but insistent. "And yet, you were in your room that night, reading. Did you hear anything? Footsteps, perhaps, near the study?" She shook her head, too quickly. "No, nothing. I was absorbed in my book. I keep to myself." Her fingers traced the book's cover, and Poirot noted the title, "A History of Ashwood Manor," a clue, perhaps, to her preoccupation. As they left the library, Poirot's mind churned. Edith hides something, Hastings, but is it guilt or fear? And Sylvia, her charm is a mask, but for what? The threads are many, but they will weave together. Their final encounter of the day came unexpectedly, as they crossed paths with Mr. Price in the hall. The solicitor, his face flushed from the evening's wine, greeted them with exaggerated warmth. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings. Progress on our little mystery." His smile was broad, but his eyes were guarded, like a man playing a hand he wasn't sure he could win. "We progress." "Monsieur Price," Poirot said, his tone bland but his gaze sharp. "Tell me, you arranged the brooch's insurance. Did you advise Colonel Marcus on its value?" Price's smile wavered. "I did, naturally. It's my duty to protect the family's assets. The brooch is worth a fortune enough to tempt any thief." He chuckled, but the sound was hollow. "And you dined here the night it vanished," Poirot continued. "You and Colonel Marcus were in the billiard room until midnight." Yes, yes," Price said, nodding vigorously. "A friendly game, nothing more. Marcus is a decent shot, though his temper gets the better of him." He laughed again, but Poirot's eyes missed nothing, the slight sheen of sweat on his brow, the way his fingers tugged at his collar. As Price excused himself, Hastings muttered, "He's nervous, Poirot, and Marcus's dead. Sylvia let that slip, think they're in cahoots." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Cahoots, perhaps, but for what purpose? Greed is a motive, yes, but the brooch's secret, its tie to Lady Beatrice, may be the true prize. We must follow every thread, Hastings, until the tapestry is complete." As they retired to their rooms, the manor's silence seemed to pulse with hidden truths. Poirot paused by a window, gazing at the moonlit gardens. The whispers of greed are loud, mon ami, he said softly, but the whispers of the past are louder still. Hercule Poirot shall hear them all. Chapter 5. The Jeweller's Account. The village of Ashwood. A cluster of stone cottages huddled beneath the grey November sky lay a brisk walk from the manor's gates. Hercule Poirot, his overcoat buttoned against the biting wind, strode purposefully along the muddy lane, his cane tapping a steady rhythm on the ground. Captain Hastings, at his side, pulled his scarf tighter, his cheeks, ruddy from the chill. Dashed cold for a jaunt, Poirot, he grumbled, glancing at the distant spires of Ashwood Manor, fading into the mist. This jeweller better have something worth hearing. Poirot's eyes gleamed beneath the brim of his Homburg hat. Mon ami, every word, every glance, is a piece of the puzzle. Monsieur Vaughan, this jeweller, has seen the brooch, touched it, perhaps coveted it. His account will reveal more than he intends. His voice was calm, but there was a steel in it that made Hastings straighten. Sensing the detective's mind was already weaving threads of suspicion, they reached the jeweller's shop, a narrow storefront with a faded sign reading Vaughan and Sons, Fine Jewels. The bell above the door jangled as they entered, and the air inside was heavy with the scent of polish and old velvet. Behind the counter stood Mr. Ernest Vaughan, a wiry man in his late 40s, his spectacles perched low on a sharp nose, his fingers stained with ink and flecked with gold dust, fidgeted with a loop as he looked up, his expression shifting from curiosity to unease. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice thin but polite, "how may I assist you?" Poirot removed his hat with a flourish, his smile disarming yet piercing. "Monsieur Vaughan, I am Hercule Poirot, and this is Captain Hastings. We come regarding the emerald brooch of Ashwood Manor. You appraised it." Vaughan's fingers tightened on the loop, his eyes darting to the shop's dim corners as if seeking escape. Yes, I did. Last week, at Colonel Hargrove's request, a magnificent piece emerald of the first water, set in gold with diamonds, quite extraordinary. His words were measured, but Poirot noted the slight tremor in his hands. Extraordinary. Indeed, Poirot said, stepping closer, his gaze locking onto Vaughan's. "Tell me, what was your impression of the brooch's owners? Madame Hargrove, Colonel Marcus, did they seem anxious about its safety?" Vaughan hesitated, adjusting his spectacles. Mrs. Hargrove was cautious, naturally. She kept the brooch in her sight the entire time, wouldn't let me take it from the study. Colonel Marcus, though, he paused, licking his lips. He asked questions, odd ones, about the market for such a piece. Said it was for insurance, but he seemed eager to know its worth. Hastings, leaning against a display case, raised an eyebrow. "Eager, eh? Sounds like Marcus was planning to sell it. Debts piling up, I'll wager." Poirot shot Hastings a glance, a silent reminder to let him lead. "And you, Monsieur Vaughan, what did you tell him? The brooch's value, perhaps, or how one might dispose of it discreetly?" Vaughan's face paled, his fingers dropping the loop with a clatter. "I told him the truth. It's worth a fortune, £20,000, perhaps more, to the right buyer, but I never suggested selling it. I'm a respectable man, sir." His voice rose, a defensive edge creeping in. and Poirot's mustache twitched with satisfaction. "Calm, monsieur," Poirot said, raising a hand. "I do not accuse, but tell me, did you notice anything unusual at the manor? A mood, perhaps? Or a visitor who lingered?" Vaughan's eyes flickered, and he busied himself straightening a tray of rings. "There was tension, I suppose. The Medros, I think, dropped a tea tray when I arrived. Clumsy girl. And that butler, Finch, watched me like a hawk. As for visitors, I saw no one else," but he hesitated, then leaned closer, his voice dropping. "Mrs. Hargrove seemed afraid, not of me, but of something. She kept touching the brooch, like it was a talisman." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "And Colonel Marcus, did he mention his financial affairs? Debts, perhaps, or plans to ease them?" Vaughan shook his head, too quickly. "He said nothing specific, only that the estate was costly to maintain. I didn't pry his fingers." Resumed their fidgeting, and Poirot noted a smudge of ink on his cuff. "Fresh and telling." "Mercy, Monsieur Vaughan," Poirot said, replacing his hat. "You have been most helpful. We shall return, if more questions arise." As they stepped into the street, he murmured to Hastings, "He conceals something, mon ami. His fear is not of us, but of what he knows." Hastings frowned, kicking a pebble into the gutter. "He's nervous as a cat, I'll give you that. Think he's in on it. Maybe he and Marcus cooked up a scheme to fence the brooch." "Perhaps," Poirot said, his tone enigmatic. "But the brooch is more than money, it is a key to secrets. We must return to the manor and stir the waters further." Back at Ashwood Manor, the afternoon light filtered through the drawing-room's tall windows, casting long shadows across the oriental rugs. Poirot requested a private audience with Colonel Marcus, who arrived with a scowl, his boots still muddy from a morning ride. "Well, Poirot," he barked, pouring himself a brandy from a decanter, "any closer to finding this blasted brooch? I've got better things to do than play detective." Poirot's smile was serene, but his eyes were sharp as steel. "Monsieur le Colonel, your impatience is noted, but truth requires time. Tell me, why did you summon Monsieur Vaughan to appraise the brooch? Was it truly for insurance, or did you consider other possibilities?" Marcus's face reddened, his glass pausing halfway to his lips. "What are you implying?" "I needed to know its value, that's all. The estate's not what it was, tenants late on rent, repairs piling up, mother's too sentimental to sell, but I thought it prudent to know our options." "Options," Poirot repeated, his voice soft but probing, "such as selling a family heirloom. A bold move, non?" Marcus slammed his glass down, brandy sloshing. "I didn't steal it, if that's what you're getting at. I was in the billiard room with Price till midnight that night. Ask him." Poirot nodded, his fingers steepled. "And your key to the safe, where is it kept?" "In my room, locked in my desk," Marcus said, his tone defiant. "No one touches it." "You're barking up the wrong tree, Poirot." "Perhaps," Poirot said, his smile unwavering. "But trees have many branches, and I explore them all." "Merci, Colonel." As Marcus stormed out, Hastings shook his head. "He's a hothead, Poirot, and those debts, Vaughan's story backs up Sylvia's hint. Think he's desperate enough to steal." "Desperation is a motive," Poirot replied, gazing at the fire crackling in the hearth. "But Marcus is not subtle. The theft required finesse, a mind more calculating. Their next encounter came unexpectedly, as Sylvia Trent breezed into the drawing room, her auburn hair catching the light like burnished copper. She carried a sketchbook, her fingers smudged with charcoal. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," she said, her voice bright, but her eyes wary. "I hear you've been to see Vaughan. Any luck?" Poirot's gaze was piercing. "Luck, mademoiselle, is for gamblers. I seek truth. You spoke of the brooches cursed. Do you believe it, or is it merely a painter's fancy?" Sylvia laughed, a sound like tinkling glass, but her fingers tightened on the sketchbook. "Oh, I'm a romantic at heart, but I don't believe in curses. Still, the brooch's history is compelling. Did Vaughan tell you how he fawned over it? Kept saying it belonged in a museum, not a safe." "And you," Mademoiselle Poirot said, leaning closer, "you were sketching that night, alone. No one to confirm your whereabouts." Her smile faltered, but she recovered quickly. "Afraid not. Art is a solitary pursuit. But I assure you, I was in my studio, not creeping about, stealing heirlooms." Her tone was playful, but Poirot caught the flicker of unease in her eyes as she left. Hastings muttered, "She's too clever by half, Poirot. And that studio of hers perfect place to hide a brooch, don't you think?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "A possibility, mon ami. But the brooch is not the only thing hidden. The heart of this mystery lies in what is not said." That evening, as the manor settled into an uneasy silence of dusk, Poirot sat in his room, his notebook open before him. He sketched a diagram of the manor's layout, marking the study, the safe, and the rooms of each suspect. The jeweler's fear, Marcus's debts, Sylvia's evasions, he murmured. "All are pieces, but the picture is incomplete. We must probe deeper, Hastings, into the shadows of Ashwood Manor." Hastings yawned, stretching in his chair. "Well, Poirot, you've got me stumped. But if anyone can crack this, it's you." Poirot's smile was serene. "The little grey cells. Mon ami, they never sleep. Tomorrow, we shall stir the pot further, and the truth will rise to the surface." Chapter 6. A nighttime encounter. The moon hung low over Ashwood Manor, its pale light filtering through the gnarled branches of ancient oaks, casting eerie shadows across the frost-dusted lawns. Hercule Poirot, unable to sleep, stood by his bedroom window, his sharp eyes scanning the darkened grounds. The manor was silent, save for the occasional creak of settling timbers. Yet the air thrummed with the unspoken tensions he had observed all day. His little grey cells, ever restless, churned with the puzzle of the missing emerald brooch, theft too precise, too intimate, to be the work of an outsider. "The truth," he murmured, adjusting his silk dressing-gown, "it hides in the shadows, but Hercule Poirot shall bring it to light." Captain Hastings, roused by Poirot's quiet movements, rubbed his eyes and joined him at the window. "Good Lord, Poirot, it's past midnight. Can't this wait till morning? What are you looking for out there?" Poirot's mustache twitched with a faint smile. "I look for nothing, mon ami, but I see much. The night reveals what the day conceals. Secrets whispered in haste, meetings that dare not face the sun. Come, let us take a turn in the gardens. The air will clear the mind." Hastings, grumbling but loyal, donned his overcoat, and the two slipped quietly down the manor's grand staircase, their footsteps muffled on the thick carpets. The hall was dark, the portraits of Hargrove ancestors looming like silent judges. Poirot paused by the study door, his fingers brushing the lock, but he moved on, leading Hastings through a side entrance into the chill night air. The gardens were a maze of hedges and stone paths, the moonlight painting them in shades of silver and shadow. Poirot moved with purpose, his cane tapping softly, his eyes darting to every rustle of leaves. "Listen, Hastings," he whispered, pausing by a stone bench. "The night is never truly silent." As if on cue, a faint sound, a muffled footfall, came from the direction of the old yew tree near the garden's edge. Poirot raised a hand, signaling silence, and gestured for Hastings to follow. They crept forward, keeping to the shadows, until they reached a low wall overlooking a clearing. There, beneath the gnarled branches of the yew, stood two figures, Rose, the maid, her cap askew, and Mr. Dobbs, the gardener, his silhouette hunched against the cold. Their voices were low, urgent, carried on the night breeze. "You can't leave now, Tom," Rose hissed, her hands wringing her apron. "Not with all this trouble. They'll think you took it." Dobbs's voice was a low growl. "I ain't stayin' where I'm not wanted, girl. The colonel's been on me back, and now this detective pokin' about time done with it. Got a job lined up in York, and I'm off tomorrow." Rose grabbed his arm, her voice rising. "But what about me? You promised we'd go together. If you leave, they'll point fingers. Finch already suspects me." Poirot's eyes gleamed in the darkness, his mind cataloging every word. Hastings, crouching beside him, whispered, "Sounds like they're planning to bolt. Think they've got the brooch." "Non mon ami," Poirot murmured. "Their fear is real, but it is not the fear of thieves. They hide something else, a secret, perhaps, but not the brooch. We must learn what binds them." The argument grew heated, Dobbs shaking off Rose's grip. "I didn't sign up for this, Rose. That brooch is cursed, and I want no part of it. You stay if you want, but I'm gone." He turned, stalking toward the stables. Leaving Rose trembling in the moonlight, Poirot waited until Dobbs's footsteps faded, then stepped into the clearing. Rose gasped, her hand flying to her mouth as she saw the detective emerge from the shadows. "Monsieur Poirot," she stammered, her face pale. I was just calm, mademoiselle," Poirot said, his voice soothing but firm. "You were speaking with Monsieur Dobbs. A private matter, perhaps, but one that touches on the brooch's disappearance. Tell me, why does he wish to leave so suddenly?" Rose's eyes darted to the ground, her hands twisting her apron into knots. "It's not what you think, sir. Tom's just fed up, Colonel. Marcus is always shouting at him to sack him. He's got a temper, the Colonel does. Tom wants out, that's all. And you, mademoiselle." Poirot pressed, stepping closer, his gaze piercing. "You fear suspicion. Why? Have you seen something you dare not speak?" Rose shook her head, tears welling. "I swear, sir, I don't know nothin' about the brooch. I was in the kitchen that night, like I said, but people talk. They say the brooch brings bad luck, and now it's gone, and everyone's lookin' at me and Tom like we're to blame." Poirot's expression softened, but his eyes remained sharp. "And this talk of a curse, do you believe it?" She hesitated, then whispered, "I don't know, sir. My gran used to say, Lady be spirit lingers, watchin' over that brooch. I thought it was just stories, but now Her voice trailed off, and she shivered, pulling her shawl tighter. "Mercy," Rose Poirot said, dismissing her with a nod. "Return to your quarters, and speak of this to no one." As she hurried away, he turned to Hastings, his face thoughtful. "She is afraid, but not of guilt. She protects someone or something, Dobbs, perhaps, or another secret entirely." Hastings frowned, rubbing his hands against the cold. "Dash it, Poirot, they're a nervous lot. But if they didn't take the brooch, what's got them so jumpy? And that cursed nonsense, surely, it's just village gossip." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Gossip, mon ami, is the shadow of truth. The curse may be superstition, but it shapes their fears. We must return to the manor and probe further." Back inside, the hall was silent, the grandfather clock ticking like a heartbeat. Poirot paused by the library door, his fingers brushing the handle. "Let us see if the night holds more surprises," he said, easing the door open. The room was dark, save for a faint glow from a dying fire. On the table lay Edith Crane's book, A History of Ashwood Manor, its pages marked with a ribbon. Poirot flipped it open, his eyes scanning a passage about Lady Beatrice's death, a cryptic note about a hidden legacy tied to the brooch. He murmured, closing the book. "Edith's interest in this history is no coincidence. She seeks answers, or perhaps she guards them." Hastings yawned, his eyes heavy. "You're seeing clues in every shadow, Poirot. Maybe she's just a bookworm." Poirot chuckled softly. "A bookworm with secrets, mon ami. Come, we must rest. Tomorrow, we confront another thread in this tapestry." As they ascended to their rooms, the manor seemed to hold its breath, its secrets pulsing in the silence. Poirot paused by his window, gazing at the yew tree where Rose and Dobbs had stood. "The nighttime encounter reveals much," he said softly, "but the heart of the mystery lies deeper still. Hercule Poirot shall find it." Chapter 7. The Safe's Secret. The pale light of dawn crept through the heavy drapes of Ashwood Manor, painting the study in muted grays, as Hercule Poirot returned to the scene of the crime. The room, with its towering bookshelves and the stern portrait of Lady Beatrice Hargrove, seemed to hold its breath, as if guarding the secret of the missing emerald brooch. Poirot, impeccable in a charcoal suit, stood before the iron safe, his gloved fingers tracing its unyielding surface. Captain Hastings, stifling a yawn, hovered nearby, his notebook open but his attention wavering in the early hours' chill. "Poirot, we've been over this safe a dozen times," Hastings said, his voice tinged with exasperation. "No scratches, no forced entry. Are you sure there's anything new to find? Perhaps we should focus on Marcus or that slippery jeweler, Vaughan." Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mustache twitching with a faint smile. "Patience, mon ami. The safe is not merely a box, it is a witness. It speaks to those who listen with method and order. We have examined its lock, but not its entirety. The little gray cells, they whisper of something overlooked." He knelt before the safe, his magnifying glass catching the faint light as he inspected its edges. The lock, as before, was pristine, but Poirot's attention shifted to the hinges, where a barely perceptible scratch marred the iron, thin, crescent-shaped mark, no wider than a hairpin. "Voila," he murmured, his voice low with triumph. "This is no accident. A tool, perhaps a fine blade, has kissed this hinge, not to break the lock, but to manipulate it. Hastings leaned closer, squinting. Manipulate? You mean someone pried it open. But how, without leaving more damage? Poirot rose, his cane tapping the floor thoughtfully. Not pried, Hastings. Adjusted. The hinge, it is loose only slightly, but enough for one with skill to lift the door just so, bypassing the lock entirely. This is the work of a craftsman, not a brute. He turned to the safe, testing the door's weight, and noted a faint give where the hinge met the frame. C'est ingénieux. The thief knew the safe's weakness. Mrs. Hargrove, summoned to the study, entered with a rustle of her black silk gown, her face pale but composed. Monsieur Poirot, have you found something? She asked, her eyes darting to the safe, as if fearing it might betray her. Perhaps Madame said, his tone gentle but probing. This scratch on the hinge, did you ever notice it before? She approached, her silver chain glinting, as she peered at the mark. No, never. The safe is old, but it's always been secure. I check it daily when the brooch is inside. Her voice trembled, and she clutched the chain, where the safe's key hung. Poirot's gaze softened, but his mind was relentless. And no jeweler, no craftsman, has worked on this safe recently. Mrs. Hargrove shook her head. Not since my husband's time, years ago. Mr. Price oversees maintenance, but he's no locksmith. Marcus has no patience for such things. Poirot nodded, filing away her words. Mercy, madame. I must speak with your butler, Finch. His knowledge of the house may illuminate this discovery. Finch appeared promptly, his tall frame rigid, his face a mask of deference that failed to hide a flicker of unease. You wished to see me, sir? He asked, his voice smooth but guarded, like a man treading on thin ice. Oui, Monsieur Finch, Poirot said, pacing before the safe, his cane a metronome of thought. This safe, its hinge bears a mark, a subtle one, but telling. Have you ever seen a tool used on it, perhaps for repair or other purposes? Finch's jaw tightened, his eyes flicking to the safe, before returning to Poirot. No, sir. I've no skill with such things. My duties are to the household, not its mechanisms. If the safe was tampered with, it wasn't by me. His tone was firm, but his hands, clasped behind his back, betrayed a slight tremor. Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. And yet, you patrol the house at night. You saw nothing near the study 2 nights ago, no one with a tool, no unusual sound. Finch's composure faltered, his lips parting as if to speak, then closing. The house was quiet, sir. I locked the doors at 10, as always. If someone was in the study, they left no trace. His voice was steady, but Poirot caught the hesitation, the weight of words unspoken. Very well, Poirot said, dismissing him with a nod. But the truth, Monsieur Finch, it has a way of surfacing. As the butler retreated, Poirot murmured to Hastings, he knows more than he admits, but fear or loyalty binds him. We must press elsewhere. Hastings frowned, scribbling in his notebook. That scratch, Poirot, it's a clever trick, I'll give you that. But who in this house has the know-how? Marcus is all bluster. Sylvia's an artist. Edith's a bookworm. Price, maybe he's slippery enough. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. A solicitor is not a locksmith, mon ami, but he may know one, or perhaps our thief learned from another source. The brooch's history, its tie to Lady Beatrice may hold the key. Seizing the moment, Poirot requested Edith Crane's presence in the study. She arrived, her grey dress blending with the room's shadows, her spectacles glinting as she adjusted them nervously. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice soft but steady, "is there news of the brooch?" "Not yet, mademoiselle," Poirot said, gesturing to the safe. "But this mark on the hinge suggests a clever hand. You study the manor's history. Have you read of any mechanical secrets tied to this safe?" Edith's fingers tightened on her shawl, her eyes darting to the portrait of Lady Beatrice. "The safe? No, nothing specific. It's been in the family since the 1800s, built for valuables. My book mentions it only in passing, as part of the estate's inventory." Her voice was calm, but her posture was rigid, as if bracing for a blow. Poirot leaned closer, his tone gentle but insistent. "And Lady Beatrice, her hidden legacy. You read of it last night. What does it mean?" Edith's flush deepened, her hands twisting the shawl. "It's vague, just a note about her possessions passing to an unnamed heir. The brooch was mentioned, but nothing more. I was curious, that's all." Her eyes avoided his, and Poirot noted the tremor in her voice, as if the past weighed heavily on her. "Curiosity is a fine thing," Poirot said, his smile disarming. "But secrets, mademoiselle, they are dangerous when hidden. If you recall anything more, you will tell Poirot. She nodded, retreating with a murmured excuse, and Hastings shook his head. "She's nervous as a rabbit, Poirot think. She knows about the safe." "Perhaps," Poirot said, his eyes on the portrait. "Or perhaps she fears what the brooch reveals. Its history is a thread we must follow." Returning to the safe, Poirot examined the desk nearby, his fingers brushing the blotter where he had previously noted an indentation. He lifted it, revealing a faint outline, not of a tool, but of a small, rectangular object, perhaps a notebook. "Or a case. Interesting," he murmured. "Something rested here, then was removed. A clue, or a distraction." Hastings peered over his shoulder. "A notebook, maybe. Someone planning the theft." "Or recording it," Poirot said, his mind racing. "We must search further, but discreetly. The household watches us, Hastings, and the thief is among them." As they left the study, Poirot paused by Lady Beatrice's portrait, her painted eyes seeming to follow him. "You guard your legacy well," he said softly, as if addressing her. "But Hercule Poirot shall uncover it." Hastings, trailing behind, sighed. "This place is full of ghosts, Poirot. That safe's secret, think it's the key to the whole thing." Poirot's smile was serene. "One key, mon ami, among many. The safe has spoken, but the manor has more to say. We shall listen." Chapter 8. Unraveling motives. The afternoon light filtered through the tall windows of Ashwood Manor's drawing room, casting a golden glow over the ornate furniture and the tense faces of its occupants. Hercule Poirot stood by the fireplace, his small, precise figure commanding the room despite his unassuming stature. His gloved hands rested lightly on his cane, and his sharp green eyes surveyed the assembled household with the intensity of a conductor before a symphony. Captain Hastings sat near the door, his notebook open, his pen poised to capture every word. though his expression betrayed a growing impatience with the manor's web of secrets. Mrs. Lavinia Hargrove sat rigidly in a high-backed chair, her black silk gown stark against the room's opulence, her hands clasped around the silver chain that held the safe's key. Colonel Marcus Hargrove lounged by the window, his broad frame slouched in defiance, a glass of whiskey dangling from his fingers. Sylvia Trent, vibrant in a crimson dress, perched on a settee, her hazel eyes flickering with a mix of amusement and wariness. Edith Crane, pale and withdrawn, sat in a corner, her spectacles glinting as she avoided eye contact. Mr. Leonard Price, the solicitor, stood by a bookcase, his florid face fixed in a forced smile, though his fingers tugged nervously at his waistcoat. "Monsieur Poirot," Mrs. Hargrove said, her voice trembling with a blend of hope and dread, "you have news of the brooch. Please, tell us you have found it." Poirot raised a hand, his smile serene but his tone commanding. "Not yet, madame, but the threads of this mystery are weaving together. The brooch is more than a jewel, it is a mirror, reflecting the desires and fears of this household. Today, we shall unravel those motives, for the truth lies not in the safe, but in the hearts of those around it." Marcus snorted, his whiskey glass clinking against the windowsill. "Get on with it, Poirot. All this talk of mirrors and motives sounds like a lot of nonsense. The brooch was stolen, plain and simple. Probably some village crook Vaughan put up to it." Poirot's eyes narrowed, pinning Marcus like a specimen. "Monsieur le Colonel, your impatience is noted, but simplicity is not the hallmark of this crime. Let us begin with you. Your debts are no secret tremors of unpaid tenants, overdue repairs, and inquiries to Monsieur Vaughan about selling the brooch. You needed funds. A fortune in emeralds would ease your burdens." Marcus's face reddened, his fists clenching. "How dare you? I didn't steal the damned thing. Yes, the estate's tight whose isn't these days, but I'd never touch Mother's precious heirloom. I was in the billiard room with Price that night, as I've said." He glared at the solicitor, who nodded vigorously, though his smile wavered. "Indeed," Poirot said, his voice smooth as silk. "Monsieur Price, you confirm this alibi, yet your eagerness to please is curious. You arranged the brooch's insurance, Nan? A policy that would pay handsomely if it were lost. Did you, perhaps, see opportunity in this theft?" Price's face flushed, his hands fluttering like trapped birds. "Now, see here, Poirot, I'm a man of law, not a thief. The insurance was for the family's protection, standard practice. Marcus and I played billiards till midnight, just as he said. I saw nothing, heard nothing." His voice was loud, but Poirot caught the slight quiver, the sheen of sweat on his brow. Sylvia laughed, a sharp, musical sound that cut through the tension. "Oh, Monsieur Poirot, you're stirring up quite a storm. Poor Mr. Price looks ready to bolt, but surely you don't think Marcus or I had anything to do with it. I was sketching in my studio, lost in my art. Marcus wouldn't know a safe's hinge from a horse's hoof." Her tone was playful, but her fingers toyed with a pendant at her throat. Betraying a flicker of unease, Poirot turned to her, his gaze piercing. "Mademoiselle Trent, your charm is a fine shield, but it does not conceal all. You spoke of the brooch's curse, its history with Lady Beatrice. You painted her portrait, studied her story. Did you, perhaps, see the brooch as more than a jewel, a key to some hidden truth? Sylvia's smile faltered, her eyes darting to Marcus. I'm an artist, Monsieur Poirot, not a historian. The brooch is beautiful, tragic like Beatrice herself. I painted it because it inspired me, not because I wanted to steal it. Her voice was steady, but Poirot noted the way her hand tightened on the pendant, as if anchoring herself. Edith Crane, silent until now, shifted in her seat, her spectacles catching the light. This is absurd, she said, her voice low but firm. Accusing everyone won't bring the brooch back. I was in my room, reading, as I told you. I know nothing of safes or hinges. Her hands twisted a handkerchief, and Poirot's eyes lingered on her, sensing a fear deeper than mere suspicion. Mademoiselle Crane, he said softly, your interest in the manor's history is commendable, but your silence speaks louder. Last night, in the library, you read of Lady Beatrice's hidden legacy. Why does this trouble you? Edith's flush deepened, her eyes dropping to her lap. It's nothing, just old stories. I was curious about the family. That's all. The brooch. It's a relic, not my concern. Her voice trembled, and Poirot noted the way her fingers shredded the handkerchief, a silent cry for composure. Mrs. Hargrove, watching the exchange, leaned forward, her voice breaking. Please, Monsieur Poirot, enough of these accusations. My family is not perfect, but they are not thieves. The brooch is our honor, its loss is a wound to us all. Poirot's expression softened, but his mind was relentless. Madame, I do not accuse for pleasure, but to uncover truth. Let us consider another thread. The butler Finch, he patrols the house, yet saw nothing the night of the theft. But Mademoiselle Crane, you mentioned seeing him near the study that evening. Edith's head snapped up, her eyes wide. I didn't mean to imply anything. I saw him in the corridor, that's all. He was doing his rounds, I suppose. Her voice was barely a whisper, and Poirot caught the glance she shot at Mrs. Hargrove, as if seeking forgiveness. Poirot turned to the door, where Finch stood, summoned once more. The butler's face was a mask, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of alarm. Monsieur Finch, Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild, you were near the study that night, yet you reported no disturbance. This mark on the safe's hinge did. You ever see a tool, perhaps in the hands of another, near this room? Finch's posture stiffened, his hands clasped tightly. I saw no tool, sir, and I was nowhere near the study after my rounds. My duties keep me busy elsewhere. His voice was steady, but Poirot noted the faint sheen on his forehead, the slight clench of his jaw. Very well, Poirot said, dismissing him with a wave. But the truth, it is like a shadow, it follows you, even when you turn away. As Finch retreated, Poirot faced the room, his voice rising with quiet authority. Each of you has a motive, a secret, a reason to wish the brooch gone. Colonel Marcus, your debts press heavily. Mademoiselle Trent, your fascination with the brooch's history is more than artistic. Mademoiselle Crane, your fear of the past betrays knowledge you conceal. Monsieur Price, your insurance dealings raise questions of profit. And Finch, your silence is too perfect. Yet only one of you, or perhaps a conspiracy, has the cunning to bypass a locked safe. Marcus slammed his glass down, whiskey splashing. This is outrageous. You've got no proof, Poirot just talk. Sylvia's laugh was brittle. He's clever, Marcus, but he's fishing. Let him fish, we've nothing to hide. Her eyes, however, avoided Poirot's, and Hastings scribbled furiously. Sensing the tension, Mrs. Hargrove rose, her voice trembling. Enough, please. Monsieur Poirot, find the brooch, but do not tear my family apart. Poirot bowed slightly, his eyes never leaving hers. Madame, I seek only the truth. It may wound, but it will heal. I shall return when the tapestry is complete. As the household dispersed, Hastings whispered, Good Lord, Poirot, you've got them all on edge. Think one of them will crack. Poirot's smile was cryptic. They are already cracking, mon ami. The motives are clear, but the method, the hinge, the silent theft points to a mind both clever and cautious. We must watch, and listen, for the final thread. As they left the drawing room, the manor's silence seemed to pulse with secrets. And Poirot's mind churned, weaving the strands of greed, fear, and history into a pattern only he could see. Chapter 9. The solicitors schemed. A late afternoon light cast long shadows across Ashwood Manor's library, where Hercule Poirot sat at a polished oak table, surrounded by the musty scent of old books and the faint crackle of a dying fire. His small, meticulous figure was a study in concentration, his gloved fingers flipping through a stack of estate documents he had requested from Mrs. Hargrove. Captain Hastings paced near the window, his restless energy a counterpoint to Poirot's calm precision. The emerald brooch's theft had woven a web of suspicion around the household, and Poirot's little gray cells were now focused on a single thread, Mr. Leonard Price, the solicitor whose jovial mask seemed to hide a calculating mind. Hastings. Mon ami, Poirot said, his voice low but resonant, cease your pacing. It disturbs the order of thought. These papers, they speak of money, of debts, of opportunities seized and squandered. Monsieur Price, he is at the heart of this tangle. Hastings stopped, leaning against the windowsill, his notebook dangling from one hand. Price, he's a bit too cheerful, I'll grant you, but a thief? He's got that alibi with Marcus billiards till midnight, and he's a solicitor, not a safecracker. What makes you so sure he's involved? Poirot's mustache twitched with a faint smile. The alibi, it is too perfect, non. And his role in the brooch's insurance, it is not merely administrative. He knows its value, its power. But let us test this thread. He closed the ledger, his eyes gleaming with purpose. We shall confront Monsieur Price, but first, we must examine his domain. With Mrs. Hargrove's reluctant permission, Poirot and Hastings ventured to the small office where Price kept his records, a cramped room off the manor's east wing. The air was thick with the scent of ink and cigar smoke, and a cluttered desk bore stacks of papers, a silver cigarette case, and a locked briefcase. Poirot's eyes scanned the room, noting a faint smudge of ink on the desk's edge, mirroring the mark he had seen on Vaughan's cuff. Curio, he murmured, his gloved fingers brushing the smudge. A connection, perhaps. Hastings, peering over his shoulder, frowned. Ink. That's hardly a clue. Poirot, every solicitor's desk has ink. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Not every ink, mon ami. This is fresh, and matches the shade on our jeweler's cuff. A small detail, but the little gray cells, they do not ignore such things. He turned to the briefcase, its lock glinting in the dim light. Madame Hargrove has given us leave to search. Let us see what Monsieur Price guards so closely. With a nod from Hastings, Poirot deftly picked the lacquer skill that always startled his friend and opened the briefcase. Inside were legal documents, estate accounts, and a single letter, its envelope marked with an insurer's crest. Poirot's eyes narrowed as he read it aloud. Dear Mr. Price, regarding the Hargrove brooch, we confirm the policy covers loss or theft up to £25,000, payable upon proof of incident. Please advise on next steps. Hastings whistled. 25,000. That's a motive, all right? Think Price planned to claim it. Poirot's gaze was intense. Not alone, perhaps. This letter is dated 2 days before the theft. Coincidence? I think not. Let us summon Monsieur Price. Price arrived, his florid face flushed from a recent cigar, his smile faltering as he saw the open briefcase. What's this, Poirot? He blustered, his hands fluttering to his waistcoat. You've no right to rummage through my papers. On the contrary, Poirot said, his voice smooth but unyielding, Madame Hargrove has given her consent. This letter, Monsieur Price, it suggests you anticipated the brooch's loss. Why? Price's eyes darted to the letter, his composure cracking. It's routine, I tell you. I manage the family's finances. Insurance is my duty. The brooch is valuable, so I ensured it was covered. Nothing sinister in that. His voice was loud, but his hands trembled, betraying his unease. Poirot leaned closer, his gaze piercing. And yet, you dined here the night it vanished, playing billiards with Colonel Marcus until midnight. A convenient alibi, but tell me, did you advise Marcus to sell the brooch, knowing his debts? Or did you see a chance to profit from its loss? Price's face reddened, his voice rising. This is preposterous. I'm no thief. Marcus and I discussed the estate. Yes, he's in deep. Anyone can see that, but I never suggested stealing. I was in the billiard room, as I said. Ask him. Poirot's smile was cold. I have asked, and your stories align too well, perhaps. But this letter, it speaks of opportunity. And the ink on your desk, it matches that on Monsieur Vaughan's cuff. Did you meet him, perhaps, to discuss more than appraisals? Prices? Mouth opened, then closed, his eyes wide with panic. Vaughan. I barely know the man. He came to appraise the brooch, that's all. If he's involved, it's nothing to do with me. His voice cracked, and Poirot noted the sweat beading on his brow, the way his fingers tugged at his collar. Calm, monsieur, Poirot said, raising a hand. The truth will surface, with or without your aid. But know this, Hercule Poirot sees what others hide. He dismissed Price with a nod, watching as the solicitor retreated. His steps unsteady, Hastings shook his head, scribbling in his notebook. He's rattled, Poirot. That letter's damning, and that ink business think he's working with Vaughan. Perhaps, Poirot said, his eyes on the briefcase. But the scheme is deeper. The brooch's theft required knowledge of the safe's hinge, a detail not easily guessed. Price is no craftsman, but he may have an accomplice. Seizing the moment, Poirot requested a private word with Sylvia Trent, who arrived in the library with a breezy smile, her crimson dress a stark contrast to the room's somber tones. Monsieur Poirot, you're keeping us all on tenterhooks, she said, her voice light but her eyes wary. "Have you caught our thief yet?" "Not yet, mademoiselle," Poirot said, his tone gentle but probing. "But I am curious about your studio. You were there the night of the theft, sketching alone. Did you, perhaps, see Monsieur Price or Monsieur Vaughan in recent days, discussing?" The brooch. Sylvia's smile faltered, her fingers toying with a charcoal pencil. "Price, he's always buzzing about, fussing over papers. I saw him with Marcus, talking money, but nothing about the brooch. As for Vaughan, he was nosy-kept, asking about my painting of Lady Beatrice, how I got the brooch's details so right." Her tone was casual, but Poirot caught the flicker of unease in her eyes. "And you told him what?" Poirot pressed, his gaze unrelenting. "Just that I studied the brooch when it was out of the safe," she said, shrugging. "Mrs. Hargrove let me sketch it once. It's a stunning piece, those roses in the gold, the emerald's fire. But I'm no thief, Monsieur Poirot." Her voice was firm, but her fingers tightened on the pencil, snapping it with a faint crack. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing her words. "Mercy, mademoiselle. Your art is revealing in more ways than one." As Sylvia left, Hastings muttered, "She's hiding something, Poirot. That snap of the pencil, she's nervous. Thinks she knows about Price's scheme?" "Possibly," Poirot said, his eyes on the letter. "But her fear is not of theft, it is of exposure. The brooch's history, its tie to Lady Beatrice, stirs her more than she admits." Returning to the documents, Poirot found a ledger noting payments to Vaughan, signed by Price, for consulting services beyond the appraisal. "Most interesting," he murmured. "Price and Vaughan are linked, but to what end? A staged theft for insurance, or something deeper?" As evening fell, Poirot stood by the library window, gazing at the darkening gardens. The solicitor's scheme is clear. Hastings' money drives him, but the brooch's secret drives another. "We are close, mon ami, but the final piece eludes us." Hastings sighed, closing his notebook. "You're a marvel, Poirot, but this place is a maze. Price, Vaughan, Sylvia, who's the mastermind?" Poirot's smile was serene. "The mastermind, mon ami, is the one who sees the safe's weakness and the household's fears. Hercule Poirot shall name them soon." Chapter 10. The Hidden Truth. The twilight cast a somber veil over Ashwood Manor, its ancient stones absorbing the last of the day's light as Hercule Poirot stood in the library, his small, meticulous figure silhouetted against the flickering fire. The air was heavy with the scent of old leather and wax, but the weight of unspoken secrets hung heavier still. Captain Hastings sat in a worn armchair, his notebook open, his brow furrowed as he watched Poirot pace before a towering bookshelf. The emerald brooch's theft had drawn a web of motives around the household, and Poirot's little grey cells were now poised to unravel its deepest thread, the truth hidden not in the safe, but in the past. "Hastings, mon ami," Poirot said, his voice a quiet cadence, "we have seen greed, fear, and deception, but the brooch is more than a jewel. It is a key to a legacy, one that someone in this house wishes to bury. Tonight we shall uncover that truth." Hastings leaned forward, his pen pausing. "You're on to something, Poirot. That letter from Price's briefcase. Pounds is a fortune, but you think there's more to it. Something about Lady Beatrice's hidden legacy Edith was reading about." Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mustache twitching with a faint smile. Priest. The brooch is not merely stolen for profit, it guards a secret that threatens someone's place in this family. Let us revisit the history, for it speaks where the living hesitate. He approached the bookshelf, retrieving a history of Ashwood Manor, the volume Edith Crane had been studying. Flipping to the marked page, he read aloud a passage about Lady Beatrice Hargrove. Her death in 1820 left a legacy unclaimed. A child born in shadow, whose name was struck from the family records. Most curious, Nan. A child hidden, tied to the brooch. Hastings frowned, rubbing his chin. A secret heir. That's a bit melodramatic, even for this place. But Edith was rattled when you mentioned it. Think she knows who this child was? Perhaps, Poirot said, closing the book with a snap. Or perhaps she fears she is connected to it. We must press her, but first, let us examine another clue, the safe's hinge. Its manipulation required knowledge, skill, and access. Who in this house possesses such a combination? Seizing the moment, Poirot requested a private audience with Edith Crane in the library. She arrived, her grey dress blending with the shadows, her spectacles catching the firelight as she adjusted them nervously. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, have you found the brooch? I can't bear this suspicion any longer. Poirot's gaze was gentle but unrelenting. Not yet, mademoiselle, but we are close. You read of Lady Beatrice's hidden legacy, a child unnamed, tied to the brooch. Why does this trouble you? Is it your own history you fear? Edith's hands trembled, her handkerchief twisting into knots. I don't know what you mean, she said, her voice breaking. I'm just a niece, a distant cousin. The brooch is Mother's Mrs. Hargrove's concern, not mine. I was reading for curiosity. Her eyes darted to the book, and Poirot noted the flush creeping up her neck. Curiosity is a fine thing, Poirot said, stepping closer, but fear is a better teacher. You know more than you say, mademoiselle. The brooch, does it hold proof of this hidden child? A miniature, perhaps, or an inscription? Edith's breath caught, her spectacles slipping as she shook her head. No, I don't know. The book only hints at a child, nothing more. Please, leave me be. She turned to flee, but Poirot's voice stopped her. Mademoiselle, the truth will not harm you unless you hide it. If you know of the brooch's secret, tell Poirot now. She hesitated, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, then fled the room, her footsteps echoing in the silent hall. Hastings shook his head. She's scared stiff, Poirot. Thinks she's the thief, protecting some family scandal. Nan, mon ami, Poirot said, his eyes on the door. She is not the thief, but she knows the brooch's power. We must look elsewhere for our culprit. Poirot's next move was to summon Mr. Finch, the butler, whose rigid posture and impassive face belied the tension Poirot had sensed from the start. Finch entered, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes wary. You sent for me, sir? He asked, his voice as smooth as polished stone. Oui, Monsieur Finch, Poirot said, pacing before the fireplace. You are the guardian of this house, yet the brooch vanished under your watch. The safe's hinge was tampered with a subtle mark requiring skill. Have you ever seen such work, perhaps in the hands of another? Finch's jaw tightened, his eyes flicking to the floor. I know nothing of safes or hinges, sir. My duties are to the household doors, windows, order. If someone tampered with the safe, it wasn't me. His voice was steady, but caught the slight tremor in his hands, the way his gaze avoided the portrait of Lady Beatrice. And yet, Poirot pressed, you were seen near the study that night. By Mademoiselle Crane. You deny this? Finch's composure cracked, his voice rising. I was on my rounds, sir, as always. The corridor leads past the study. It means nothing. I saw no one, heard no one. His eyes darted to the door, as if expecting rescue. Poirot's smile was cold. You protest much, Monsieur Finch. But the truth, it is like a shadow, it follows you. Did someone, perhaps Monsieur Priest, ask you to turn a blind eye that night? Finch's face paled, his hands clenching. I swear, sir, I did nothing wrong, Mr. Price. He's the family's man, not mine. I follow Mrs. Hargrove's orders. He retreated, dismissed by Poirot's nod, but his haste betrayed his fear. Hastings scribbled furiously. He's hiding something, Poirot. Think Price paid him off. That insurance letter's looking more suspicious by the minute. Oui, Poirot said, his eyes on the portrait. Price is central, but not alone. The brooch's theft required a conspiracy, knowledge of the safe, access to the study, and a motive beyond money. The legacy of Lady Beatrice is the key. Returning to the documents, Poirot found a faded letter tucked in the Manor's history book, its ink barely legible. It was a note from Lady Beatrice to an unnamed recipient, dated 1820. The brooch holds my heart, my shame, my proof. Keep it safe, lest our line be undone. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Voila, the brooch contains a secret, perhaps a miniature or document proving the child's existence. This is why it was stolen, not for profit, but to hide a truth, he requested. Mrs. Hargrove's presence, and she arrived, her face drawn, the silver chain at her neck glinting. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice trembling, you speak of legacies and secrets. What have you found? Poirot held up the letter, his tone gentle but firm. This, madame, suggests the brooch holds proof of Lady Beatrice's child and heir, perhaps, who threatens the family's line. Do you know of this? Mrs. Hargrove's hand flew to her chain, her eyes wide. I've heard whispers, old stories. Beatrice's child was never acknowledged, sent away. The brooch was her mother's, passed to her, but I never thought. Her voice broke, and she sank into a chair. Poirot's gaze softened. And Edith, could she be connected to this child? Mrs. Hargrove shook her head, tears glistening. Edith is my niece, my sister's daughter, but her mother. There were rumors, long ago, of a connection to Beatrice's line. I never believed them until now. Poirot nodded, his mind racing. The thief seeks to bury this truth, madame. But Hercule Poirot shall unearth it. As evening deepened, Poirot stood by the window, gazing at the moonlit gardens. The hidden truth is clear. Hastings, the brooch, proves a lineage that someone wishes to erase. Price's scheme, Finch's silence, Edith's fear, they converge on this secret. We are close, mon ami. Hastings closed his notebook, his eyes wide. A secret heir. Good Lord, Poirot, it's like a novel. But who's behind it, Price? Or someone else pulling the strings? Poirot's smile was serene. The strings, mon ami, are tangled, but Hercule Poirot shall cut them. Tomorrow, we confront the heart of this mystery. Chapter 11. The confession. The air in Ashwood Manor's grand drawing-room was thick with anticipation, as if the very walls held their breath. The morning light streamed through tall windows, glinting off the polished surfaces of antique furniture. But the warmth of the sun did little to ease the chill of suspicion that enveloped the gathered household. Hercule Poirot stood at the center of the room, his small, immaculate figure a beacon of authority, his green eyes sharp as they surveyed the faces before him. Captain Hastings stood by the door, his notebook tucked away, his gaze fixed on Poirot. Sensing the detective was poised to unravel the mystery of the stolen emerald brooch, Mrs. Lavinia Hargrove sat in her usual high-backed chair, her black silk gown stark against the room's opulence, her hands clutching the silver chain that held the safe's key. Her face was pale, her eyes shadowed with dread. Colonel Marcus Hargrove slouched against the mantelpiece, his broad frame tense, his whiskey glass forgotten on the hearth. Sylvia Trent perched on a velvet settee, her crimson dress vibrant but her hazel eyes wary, her fingers twisting a silk scarf. Edith Crane sat in a corner, her spectacles glinting as she stared at her lap, her hands shredding a handkerchief. Mr. Leonard Price, the solicitor, stood by a bookcase, his florid face strained, his forced smile replaced by a nervous grimace. Mr. Finch, the butler, lingered near the door, his rigid posture betraying a flicker of unease. Monsieur Poirot, Mrs. Hargrove said, her voice trembling, "You have kept us in suspense long enough. Have you found my brooch? Please end this torment." Poirot raised a hand, his smile serene but his tone commanding. Madame et messieurs, the torment ends today. The emerald brooch. It is not merely a jewel but a key to a secret or a legacy hidden in the shadows of Ashwood Manor. Its theft was no act of greed alone, but a desperate move to conceal a truth that threatens this family's foundation. Poirot has seen through the deception, and now the truth shall be revealed. Marcus snorted, crossing his arms. Get on with it, Poirot. All this talk of legacies and secrets sounds like a fairy tale. Who's the thief? Point the finger and be done. Poirot's eyes gleamed, pinning Marcus with a glance. Patience, Monsieur le Colonel. The truth requires method. Let us begin with the facts. The brooch vanished from a locked safe, its hinge tampered with a subtle mark, requiring skill. The thief had access, knowledge, and motive. We have seen many motives here. Debts, ambition, fear. But one motive rises above the rest, a secret, tied to Lady Beatrice Hargrove and her hidden child. Edith gasped, her handkerchief falling to the floor. Sylvia's scarf twisted tighter, and Price's face paled, his hands gripping the bookcase. Finch's eyes darted to the door, but Poirot's voice held them all. The brooch, Poirot continued, contains proof of this child, a miniature, perhaps, or an inscription naming an heir struck from the family records. Its theft was meant to bury this truth, to protect the Hargrove lineage as it stands. Let us examine the players in this drama. He turned to Marcus, his gaze unrelenting. Monsieur le Colonel, your debts are heavy, and you inquired about selling the brooch through Monsieur Vaughan. Your alibi billiards with Monsieur Price is solid, but your desperation is clear. Did you plan the theft, perhaps with another's aid? Marcus's face reddened, his fists clenching. I told you, I didn't touch it. Yes, I'm in debt. Who isn't? But I wouldn't steal from mother. You've got no proof. His voice boomed, but Poirot noted the flicker of fear in his eyes. Poirot turned to Sylvia. Mademoiselle Trent, your fascination with Lady Beatrice and her brooch is more than artistic. You sketched it, studied it, spoke of its curse. Did you see its secret and seek to hide it? Perhaps to secure your place as Marcus's future wife. Sylvia laughed, a brittle sound, but her fingers betrayed her, knotting the scarf. You're clever, Monsieur Poirot, but I'm no thief. I painted the brooch because it's beautiful, tragic. If it holds secrets, they're not mine. Her eyes flicked to Edith, a silent accusation. Poirot's gaze shifted to Edith. Mademoiselle Crane, your fear of the brooch's history is palpable. You read of Lady Beatrice's hidden child, and your reaction betrays knowledge. Are you that child's descendant, and did you steal the brooch to protect your claymore to hide it? Edith's spectacles slipped, her hands trembling. No, I'm no thief. I read about Beatrice, yes, but only because I'm curious. My mother, she never spoke of such things. I swear, I know nothing. Her voice broke, tears glistening. And Poirot noted her desperation, not of guilt, but of terror. He turned to Price, his voice sharpening. Monsieur Price, your role is central. The insurance letter, the payments to Vaughan, your presence the night of the theft all point to a scheme. You knew the brooch's value, its power. Did you orchestrate its theft, using your knowledge of the family's secrets? Price's face crumpled, his hands fluttering. I'm innocent, Poirot. The insurance was routine, the payments to Vaughan. For appraisals, I played billiards with Marcus Askham. I had no part in this. His voice was shrill, but Poirot caught the sweat on his brow, the way his eyes avoided Marcus's. Finally, Poirot faced Finch. Monsieur Finch, you guard this house, yet you were near the study that night. You deny tampering with the safe. But your silence is too perfect. Did you aid another, perhaps under pressure? Finch's posture stiffened, his face a mask. I did my duty, sir. I saw nothing, heard nothing. If the safe was tampered with, it wasn't by me. His voice was steady, but his hands, clasped behind his back, trembled slightly. Poirot stepped forward, his voice rising with quiet authority. Enough. The little gray cells have worked their magic. The brooch was stolen, not for money, but to hide the truth of Lady Beatrice's child, a truth that threatens the inheritance of this estate. The thief is among you, and their accomplice stands revealed. He paused, letting the silence stretch, then pointed to Price. Monsieur Price, you are the architect of this theft. You knew the brooch's secreta miniature inside, naming Beatrice's child, a threat to Marcus's claim as heir. You conspired with Vaughan to stage the theft, using your access to the manor and your knowledge of the safe's hinge, learned from old estate records. Price gasped, staggering back. Lies, I did no such thing. You've no proof. Poirot's smile was cold. The proof is in your briefcase, the letter, the payments to Vaughan, the ink matching his cuff. And your accomplice. He turned to Finch, whose face paled. Monsieur Finch, you provided access, turning a blind eye for a Price. You saw Price near the study, but you said nothing, bound by his promise of payment. Finch's composure shattered, his voice low. I needed the money, sir. My sister's ill, hospital bills piling up. Price said it was just insurance. No harm done. I didn't touch the safe. His confession hung in the air, a dam breaking. Price lunged forward, his voice desperate. It wasn't my idea. Marquise wanted the money, pushed me to arrange it. I only helped with the details. His words spilled out, implicating Marcus, who roared in protest. Liar. Marcus shouted, advancing on Price. I never told you to steal it. You're trying to pin this on me. Mrs. Hargrove rose, her voice trembling. Enough. Monsieur Poirot, where is my brooch? Poirot's eyes softened. Madame, it is safe. I found it this morning, hidden in Monsieur Price's office, inside a locked drawer lined with velvet. The miniature within confirms being child and ancestor of Mademoiselle Crane, whose mother was the unacknowledged heir. Price sought to destroy it, to secure Marcus's inheritance. Edith sobbed, her hands covering her face. I didn't know. I suspected, but I didn't want it to be true. Poirot bowed slightly. The truth is yours now, mademoiselle. The brooch shall be returned, and the legacy honored. As Price and Finch were led away, the room fell silent, the weight of revelation settling over the household. Poirot's gaze lingered on the portrait of Lady Beatrice, her painted eyes serene at last. Hastings whispered, Good Lord, Poirot, you've done it again. A secret heir, a conspiracy. How do you see it all? Poirot's smile was serene. The little grey cells, mon ami, they see what the heart hides. Now, let us restore peace to Ashwood Manor. Chapter 12. The departure. The morning sun broke through the heavy clouds that had cloaked Ashwood Manor, casting a tentative glow over the estate's weathered stones as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings prepared to leave. The grand hall, with its towering portraits and polished oak, seemed quieter now, as if the unmasking of the brooch's thief had lifted a weight from its ancient walls. Poirot stood by the open front door, his impeccable suit and Homburg hat a stark contrast to the manor's somber grandeur. His cane rested lightly in his gloved hand, and his sharp green eyes surveyed the scene with a serene satisfaction. Hastings, beside him, adjusted his scarf against the morning chill, his suitcase at his feet, his notebook tucked away after a final flurry of scribbling. Mrs. Lavinia Hargrove stood at the foot of the grand staircase, her black silk gown softened by a shawl, the silver chain at her neck glinting with the safe's key. Her face, though still pale, held a new-found resolve, as if the restoration of the emerald brooch had restored a piece of her family's honor. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice steady but warm with gratitude, you have saved us from more than theft. The truth, though painful, has set us free. The brooch is back where it belongs, and I shall ensure its secret is honored. Poirot bowed, his mustache twitching with a faint smile. Madame, it is the duty of Hercule Poirot to bring order to chaos. The brooch, with its miniature of Lady Beatrice's child, will now be a bridge to your family's past, not a burden. Mademoiselle Crane, she is the heir to that legacy. Edith Crane, standing a step behind Mrs. Hargrove, nodded, her spectacles catching the light. Her grey dress was unchanged, but her posture was less hunched, as if a weight had lifted. I never wanted the estate, Monsieur Poirot, she said softly, but knowing the truth about my mother, it gives me peace. I'll stay with Aunt Lavinia, help her preserve our history. Her voice held a quiet strength, and Poirot noted the absence of her usual nervous fidgeting. Colonel Marcus Hargrove lingered near the door, his broad frame tense, his face a mask of grudging acceptance. The revelation of his role in pushing Mr. Price's scheme, though not directly criminal, had tarnished his bluster. "Poirot," he said gruffly, avoiding eye contact, "I suppose I owe you thanks. Didn't mean for things to go this far. I'll sort out the debt, sell some land if I must. No more shortcuts." His tone was curt, but Poirot caught the flicker of shame in his eyes. A promise of reform. Sylvia Trent, vibrant in a green coat that echoed the brooch's emerald, stood by Marcus, her arm linked with his. Her hazel eyes sparkled with a mix of relief and defiance. "You've stirred quite the hornet's nest, Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice light but sincere. "I'm glad it's over. Marcus and I will start fresh. No more curses." She squeezed his arm, and Poirot noted the genuine affection beneath her usual bravado, a sign she would anchor Marcus's resolve. Mr. Finch, the butler, was absent. His role in the theft, though born of desperation for his sister's medical bills having cost him his position, Mrs. Hargrove had agreed to forego charges, provided he left Ashwood at once. Mr. Price, the solicitor, had been handed to the authorities. His scheme to profit from the brooch's loss exposed, his reputation in ruins. The village jeweler, Mr. Vaughan, faced questioning for his complicity, though his role was minor, a pawn in Price's game, as the carriage arrived to take Poirot and Hastings to the station. Mrs. Hargrove clasped Poirot's hand, her eyes glistening. "Monsieur Poirot, how can I ever repay you? You've restored more than a jewel, you've given us truth." Poirot's smile was warm, his bow elegant. "Madame, the truth is its own reward. But if you insist, a quiet life for Ashwood Manor is payment enough. Guard the brooch, and let its legacy heal, not divide." Hastings, hefting his suitcase, chuckled as they stepped outside. Another, not untied, a Poirot. Secret heirs, scheming solicitors, cursed brooches. This place is straight out of a novel. You've outdone yourself. Poirot's eyes twinkled. As he climbed into the carriage, the crunch of gravel underfoot. Mon ami, the human heart is the greatest novel of all, full of twists and secrets. Hercule Poirot merely reads its pages with care. He glanced back at the manor, where Mrs. Hargrove and Edith stood on the steps, waving farewell. "The little grey cells, they have served us well." As the carriage rolled toward the village, Hastings leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "What's next, Poirot? Back to London for a rest, or another mystery waiting?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic, his gaze fixed on the horizon. The world, mon ami, is never short of mysteries. But for now, a cup of tisane and a quiet evening will suffice until the next puzzle calls. The manor faded into the mist, its secrets laid bare, its wounds beginning to heal. Poirot settled into his seat, his mind already turning to the next challenge, for the little grey cells never truly rested.